Hello, my name's Cliff Freilich. I'm the Executive Director of Cinema St. Louis, and we are the presenters of the 29th Annual Whitaker St. Louis International Film Festival. We're really pleased to have the filmmakers of MLK FBI with us to do a discussion with Dr. Lerone Martin. Let me talk a little bit about Lerone's background first. He teaches at Washington University, where he is the Director of American Culture Studies and Associate Professor of Religion and Politics, American Culture Studies, and African American Studies. Your credits just go on and on, Lerone. And then we are joined by the filmmakers, Director Sam Pollard. Sam actually attended the festival a couple years back. We played, I think at this stage, this might be the fifth documentary that we played by Sam, and we honored him quite deservedly with a Lifetime Achievement Award in documentary a couple of years back. And then last, but absolutely not least, the co-writer and producer of MLK FBI is Benjamin Hedin. And all three of you are going to have now a conversation about this very provocative film. And I will exit and turn things over to you, Dr.
Well, thank you. It's a great opportunity to be with you both. The film is outstanding, so I just want to get right to it. I'm curious as to if you could say a word about what made you decide to make this film.
Ben.
Sam and I started talking about making this film early in 2017. I had read David Garrow's book on the FBI's surveillance of King while researching King's evolving stance towards the Vietnam War. Mm-hmm. And it had sort of unlocked something in me. Sam and I had just finished another documentary, Two Trains Running. And so that's when I kind of reached out to him and said, this might be worth pursuing.
Hmm. And then when I read the book, Lerone, I thought, wow, man, I think Ben's absolutely correct. I had done, worked on Eyes on the Prize and other shows that, delved into the civil rights struggle. So this was I knew about some of this material, but I didn't know the depths that it went until I read the book. So I thought it was also a good second film for Ben and I to do.
And it's an excellent film. It is.
Thank you.
So speaking of that, about what the new material that you discovered in making this film and what you learned, what after making this film, what do you think was at the core of the FBI's antagonism against Martin Luther King?
From my perspective, it was absolute fear that here was a Black man, or Black groups of people who were going to upend the notion of American democracy. The fact that they wanted integration, they didn't want to be sitting in the back of the bus anymore. And for people like Hoover and others, this wasn't the America that they had grown up in, and they felt like these upstart Black people were asking for change too rapidly, and how dare they go out in the streets and picket and protest and sit in, and ask for change. And, for Hoover and the FBI and William Sullivan, one of his, very right-hand lieutenants, it was like, this was part of what he felt initially was a communist threat, to destroy America. So I think that was part of his obsession. I mean, it was also probably a personal obsession to it, the notion of a Black man being empowered. Mm-hmm. Ben?
Right.
Yes, no, I agree. I mean, all along, Sam and I wanted to not only tell the story, but also use it as a point of entry into this larger discussion or investigation, and to kind of, common words, but words that don't have a universal meaning, but are code. As Sam said, the word America, the word free, the word democracy, it meant vastly different things to King and to Hoover. Which is still true today. Which certainly you saw when we started the film. You saw with the protests inspired by Colin Kaepernick, and obviously you saw again this summer in most cities in America.
Yeah. So I wanted to touch on something that both of you mentioned about these different ideas of morality, democracy, and Sam, what you had said as relates to the personal aspect. You all do a great job of thoroughly interrogating and looking at King's personal life and what the FBI was able to uncover, if you will, about his personal life. What in the film were you trying to communicate to the audience as it relates to how King's personal life relates to not just the FBI's investigation of King, but what it means to the broader civil rights movement and our understanding of the civil rights movement?
Oh, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about what it means to the broader civil rights movement. I think what we wanted people to understand that he was a human being, and he had his flaws like anyone else, and he was complicated. And I think that, the representation of Dr. King that we've known for many years is that he's this iconic presence who gave the phenomenal "I Have a Dream" speech, and that he was a man who was front and center of the civil rights movement, and he's become iconic. I think people forget that, like all of us, he was human, and he had a personal life. Now, when Hoover and his agents found out that he was involved with other women, they saw that as an opportunity to use that against King to hopefully destroy his reputation, destroy the movement, which wasn't successful. But so I'm not sure it has a real connection to the greatest civil rights movement. It just shows, one of the things it does show from my perspective, which I think we do pretty well, is as the film unfolds and that King is not only dealing with the day-to-day struggles of the movement, but he's dealing with his own personal and inner demons. He's dealing with the FBI constantly monitoring him. You can see the stress in his face with the way we put together the footage. I mean, done by our really fabulous editor, Laura Tomaselli. So, it just shows that he was human, like all of us, that, there were parts of him that were more complicated than other parts than what people most usually think, how most people usually think of Dr. King.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just add briefly that in that, with his personal life, there's also an element of this story that the FBI's campaign to discredit or to sully King is not over in every sense of the word, because things will continue to come out, and we're in information that we should not have, we are becoming privy to as it's divulged from the National Archives. So it's almost like it's a road that you don't necessarily want to go down. And when you do, you become a sort of unwitting accomplice of the FBI. But then, once you start looking into it, you can't just, you can't take it at face value, but it's important, as we do in the film, to contextualize, to place it in the context of, this sort of the history of, as Donna Murch says in the film, Black political power being perceived and discredited as a sexual threat. Yeah. And so what Hoover and Sullivan were doing was not unique to them, but is a thread in American history.
And I really appreciated the way you guys put that in context, that long history, the way you show the cartoons, the various films about the kind of narrative in America about Black male sexuality and leadership. And I really appreciated that in the film. So as a result of that, I'm curious, as filmmakers, are the two of you in favor of the National Archives in 2027? As you mentioned at the end of the film, are you in favor of the full release of this to the broader public? Do you have a different viewpoint on this now that you've made the film? Historians are debating this about, what would be the value if we have a full release of everything that the FBI has on King, if you will. So I'm curious, as the filmmakers, how do you all feel about that? Are these documents something that the public should have full access to?
Well, my take is yes. My take, as a filmmaker, and lately I'm calling myself a film anthropologist.
I like that. I like that, Sam.
To me, I think it's fine. I mean, I don't personally think it's going to sully and destroy Dr. King's reputation. I think that, as we know, history always, you want to dig into it. You want to understand history. You want to understand the people who are part of this history. And there may be stuff there that might be valuable from a civil rights perspective. There may be discussions with people like Andy Young and Clarence Jones and others, James Bevel, that might be invaluable stuff that we didn't know about their strategies for the movement, besides the other stuff we may hear. So I'm open to the idea of listening to it. I don't have to debate I mean, I could, but I don't. I feel strongly. I mean, I know that some of the people in our film, like Mr. Chuck Knox, the former FBI agent, didn't feel it would make any sense. But I think it's going to be much more there than just the stuff that the titillating stuff that people can assume is there.
Okay.
I don't know how Ben feels.
Well, I mean, I could argue both sides. If there is stuff other than, you know, then if there is more about the movement and strategy, then that would certainly be an unexpected find. But I can certainly, I mean, I can argue this both ways, which is the opposite of what you're asking, Lerone. So I apologize, but
No, that's okay. That's okay.
I mean, I think that, you know, maybe a little bit more than Sam. Sam could too, but you know, you can certainly make the argument that there isn't much of value, and it was obtained for the most part illegally.
Illegally. That's right. That's right.
So, you know, I don't have a strong opinion, but I actually tend to shade more towards no.
Okay.
Although having said that, I don't think there's a way for it to be, you know, prevented. I mean, I think come February 1st, 2027, it'll be out.
Okay. So with that being said, that there's a wonderful question that you all ask in the film that I'd like to turn to you and ask, and that is, you towards the end of the film, you asked David Garrow, what did he feel was his responsibility as a historian and dealing with this topic? So I would love if you all can answer that question as well. What do you feel as filmmaker slash film anthropologist? What do you think is your responsibility having to brought this story to life for so many people, right? That this story has been written about, but you really bring it to life. So what do you feel now it was your responsibility, or maybe even going into the film, what you feel your responsibility is dealing with this material and bringing it to life?
Well, I would say this. I would say that as a filmmaker, you know, making documentaries for so many years, part of my responsibility is to find stories that I feel that are going to be important, that's going to have some real levels of complexity to it. It's going to have some shadings to it. It's not going to be so black and white, because nothing's black and white. The thing that makes me responsible as a filmmaker is the idea that I'm not trying to do a gotcha film. I'm not trying to do a titillating film. I'm trying to do a film that's going to be based on facts and information, and we're going to try to make sure we do the most honest job that we can. You know, I mean, we could have made a film that would have been more titillating, more salacious, but to me, that would have been terrible. That would have been going against the grain of what I think a good documentary filmmaker is all about. So I think we both did a very responsible, journalistic, you know, serious film that gives respect to both King and what he had to struggle with in America in the 50s and the 60s.
Mm.
We didn't, and right, and it's not gotcha, but you know, on the other hand, you know, Sam and I made the decision not to duck some information, you know, not to suppress some of what has been revealed, but to take it on and be, you know, sort of honor and duty bound to include, you know, even though it doesn't, you know, it potentially does not jive with the popular image of King.
I think you all did a wonderful job. I really do. I really appreciated the unflinching look that you all offered. I want to ask a self-indulgent question, if I could, and that is, I'm teaching a class right now at Washington University called the FBI in American History. My students right now are currently reading the Church Committee report, the report that reveals all that the FBI was engaged in as relates to COINTELPRO and some of the information you all really bring to life. Mm-hmm. What do you hope students who will watch this film, what do you hope that the message they'll take away from it? Or what do you hope that is the one nugget that they'll leave with? Because I'm watching students now realize all that the FBI has done in American history. They're writing about it this week, and they're fascinated, they're shocked, they're upset. There's a range of emotions. So I'm wondering what you hope students who are watching this film, and will watch this film for decades to come, what do you hope is one of the things they'll take away from it?
My hope is this: never buy into the mythology about anything. Question it, challenge it, be curious about it. Because as soon as you buy into the mythology, you fall into the trap, and that's an important thing to understand. Don't fall into the trap, this whole notion of America do or die, put your hand to your chest. The FBI was this wonderful organization. Don't buy into it. I fell into the trap when I was 15, 16 years old, watching all these old movies that we put clips in from the film. I fell into the trap when I watched the ABC show, The FBI Story with Efrem Zimbalist Jr. I fell into the trap when I watched Jimmy Cagney and G-Men. Don't fall into the trap. Question, question, question.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Ben.
Yeah. And, don't necessarily have faith in our institutions.
That's right.
I mean, at the beginning, when I went to Sam with this project at the start of 2017, Trump had just been inaugurated. And this was something you heard, right? That we, as a bulwark against whatever the 4 years would bring, you have to have faith in our institutions. And you hear that and you're just like, what planet are you living on? If anything, the film espouses you to have faith in King and in what he represents. Have faith in nonviolence, in peaceful assembly, in the legacy of the abolition movement. But to have faith in power structures, that are protecting, in essence, white supremacy, that's misplaced, unearned faith.
Well, I also, this is the final question, I also got the sense that one of the things you all were really bringing to light is that part of what makes democracies work is the ability of people to hold these institutions accountable. And I felt like that you all did such a great job of that. And this film, in many ways, is doing that. Yeah. So the last question I'll ask of you is, you had mentioned earlier, Ben, about Black Lives Matter protests, Colin Kaepernick, and other things like that. Do you think your film speaks to these issues today? And if so, how?
Hey, Ben.
Well, I certainly do. And I think it's important to be reminded, when King, in the brief clip of the final speech that he gave on April 3rd, 1968, that we show, he does a wonderful refrain about the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. Somewhere I read.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's right. It's very powerful. It's very musical, and he ends up by saying the greatness of America is the right to protest for right. And there's such a concentration and an emphasis, rightfully so, on voting. But it's not the only tool. And I hope the film reminds people of that.
Beautifully said. Sam, you want to add to that?
I can't say anything. I think he hit it right on the head. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate this opportunity to speak with you all. The film is absolutely outstanding. You do such a wonderful job of bringing the story to life, and all the footage. We didn't get a chance to see some of the contributors because we were so focused on the footage, and that editorial decision that you all made was outstanding, and it really brings the film to life, and people will be watching it for decades. And so on behalf of
I just want to say, Lerone, we had two great folks. I mean, we had a lot of great people involved, but we have to really, do a shout out to Brian Becker, who was our archival producer, who found some extraordinary stuff that Ben and I had never seen.
Yeah.
And Laura Tomaselli, who was the editor, who did a wonderful job going through all that footage, shaping the story with Ben. It was a great collaboration.
It was. And people will be watching this film for decades to come. So on behalf of historians and those who are committed to accountability, democracy, and truth, I say thank you to you both for this wonderful film.
Thank you. All right, here's my question out of the box. I mean, Lerone, did you get that from Lerone Bennett Jr.? No.
My parents did. My parents did. They were. My mother was pregnant and reading Ebony magazine, and Lerone Allen Bennett was editing Ebony at the time. That's right, Sam. That's where my name comes from. Okay. And it turns out I ended up being a historian. So mom had foresight.
Right. Good. Yeah. Thank you, man. Thank you.
No, thank you both for your time. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you. Very much appreciate it. We hope to see more films from you, Sam. As I said, I think this is our 5th over the past several years. So we want to see more.
Be good. Take care of yourselves.
Thanks.
Right.